So when I think about Abraham, I think, of course, of the fact that he is the father of Israel and one of the great patriarchs and one of the founders of our Christian tradition. But I also think of him as the central figure in so many of the biblical stories that I was told as a child. And I had so many questions about Abraham as a child when I heard those stories. And so I really think that it's important to us as people of faith to go back and look through those same questioning lenses that we used when we first heard those stories, so that we can take a lot of these biblical accounts and we can appropriate them for ourselves. What does it mean to be a person of faith? What do these stories mean to us in terms of our own relationship with God? And so when I think about Abraham, I think about a person who was just so very human in so many of the biblical stories about him. He was human with all of our human failings, and one of the things that I think about, one of the earliest stories about Abraham in the Bible was involved dishonesty. Abraham was involved in a situation that he was clearly dishonest about his relationship with his wife, wanting her to be seen as his sister. You look at Abraham taking matters into his own hands, far, far later in the biblical accounts, taking matters into his own hands with Hagar, and his inability to, as we say, wait on the Lord and see what God was actually going to do to fulfill God's promises to him. And then you look at, well, for me as a woman, I really can't think of Abraham without thinking of Sarah and without thinking of Hagar, and how he interacted with them, and how, at least in my reading, in so many of the stories, his own failings kind of interacted with theirs, and his own inability to wait and to be patient for God's promises interacted with Sarah's, and the three of them together just kind of forming a situation that just looks like disorganization, shall we say. And to me, it just looks so very human. And I think that that's important for us to see. And I think that it's important for us to also see that Abraham rarely did anything without talking to God. He was truly a person who walked with God. So in the midst of his humanity, his messy, unscripted humanity, he also walked with God. He talked with God, and he listened to God, and he tried his best to follow God's directions. And so I think for me, that's what Abraham means. Abraham means being human and still feeling strong enough in our humanity and strong enough in our faith to be able to have a real relationship with God.